with a video for you all about doing virtual assessments. So I wanted to specifically highlight one informal assessment that I've been doing virtually that has been a game changer, but also wanted to just highlight the possibility of doing virtual assessments with the green screen for those of you who haven't tried it yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using Burm Speech Publications Informal Assessment of Apraxia and Graham Speech Therapy's Oral Motor Assessment, which can be found on her website. And this informal assessment for apraxia can be found on Burm Speech Publications website. And I'll link all of that so that you all can access it. But I wanted to show you all because it's honestly, even though it's an informal assessment, you're going to get way more information out of this assessment than you would a GIFTA, CAP, any of the articulation assessments we've been using. Obviously, they're standardized, but this is different. It gives you so much more insight, even more than the Kaufman. I'm just going to say that. That's how good it is. So let's dive in and look into it. Okay, so I just jumped into the Burm Speech Publications Informal Assessment. The worksheets are right here, so they're going to be on my green screen. I'm just going to show you all what I've been doing for virtual assessments. So let's dive in. So this is the Childhood Apraxia Speech Assessment Guide. So not only is it an informal assessment, it also guides you as the clinician to performing this type of assessment and gives me and probably all other therapists who aren't apraxia specialists a lot of insight on how to properly assess and how to determine whether or not we're really seeing signs of childhood apraxia of speech or not. So let's look into it. So what you do first, Jenny Burm recommends using Graham Speech Therapy Oral Facial Exam, which is what I used. And this is just a little brief screenshot of that. So if you go to grahamspeechtherapy.com, you can download the oral facial exam. And there are some pieces that are difficult to do over virtual assessment with the tongue depressor, but you can still model it for yourself and have your client's mom help them. But most of this stuff you can easily model on camera, and you can just be taking data as you perform the assessment. So after you do that, you kind of rule out whether or not we're looking at something that might be a oral facial issue, something that might be dysarthria versus CAS. So it isn't necessary to complete this in order to get the diagnosis for CAS, but it is highly recommended to rule things out. So then you can see what's inside of the informal assessment. So Jenny Burm has listed out all of the pieces that are in the assessment. And there are some pieces here that I think a lot of clinicians might not even think about. Like, for instance, for speech sound probing, you might want to take the video of your child while you're working on this assessment, because you need to rewatch it multiple times to make sure that you got two different observations of the same observed feature. So that's something that I had never done before, and it really gave me some information about, am I really seeing a feature, or did it just happen one time and I wrote it down? So it's just a little bit more accurate than when we're doing our fast assessments. She also has these definitions for different features that you might be seeing. So voicing errors, vowel distortions, groping, and you can learn and sort of evaluate which features you're seeing and use these to code while you're doing the assessment later. So I kind of studied these up before I did it. And she also walks through the different types of cues. So most of us know about different types of cues for sound cueing, but it's really good to read through this before you do this type of assessment. That way you know, okay, I definitely did forward chaining there. I can write that one down. I did backward chaining here. I can write that one down. Sometimes I forget to include cues that I'm using, and it just was helpful for me to walk myself through all of this and then remind myself later, oh yeah, you were doing you're doing slow rate of speech there, right? Slow rate, etc. Flag checklist. So this is something that I had never used before either. These are just nice kind of indicators for you and parent to see if we're working with somebody who might really be demonstrating CAS or not so much. So just walking through a family checklist with this, it's really helpful for them and for you as the clinician. And then, going through the assessment checklist, did you do a language assessment? All of this stuff is in there. And case history, core word list, and then the sound inventory. So this is the part I really wanted to talk about. So what I really found useful with using the green screen here is you can use your Burm speech sound cue cards and scan them and then put them up on the green screen while you're doing this assessment. And it makes it way easier to see if your kids are actually able to imitate. So what I did is I would move over here and I'm trying to assess if my kids can get that popcorn sound. And I put up the picture big, and I'll first say the sound. Can I hear that sound from you? And you can walk through if they did it spontaneously, if they needed multiple cues. And I mean, I really highly recommend using the speech sound cues here because they are made for this assessment. The assessment in these are made together. So it could be done by just picking up a picture of popcorn, but it's much more consistent for later working with your clients with the cards if you do the assessment with these. So that way, when you pull them out later, it's consistent every time. So, we're just working on going through the sound assessment and then pulling up our cards. And these are just scanned images of the cards that I scanned with TurboScan and then put them into a PowerPoint. Once you've finished the individual sound inventory check, then you move on to working on consonant vowel words, vowel consonant words, and moving all the way through to multisyllabic words, more complex words. But what I really like about doing this type of informal assessment is making sure to find out if your kid can actually produce the sound. So you can go through all the different cues versus using, let's say, the Goldman Bristow, where we're not giving any cues. We're going to show you once, you're going to say it once, and then we're going to move to the next word. This is all about finding out what sounds our kids can actually produce and then working through those later. So what I really appreciated is I filmed my assessment and then was able to transcribe I didn't transcribe any of this while I was doing the assessment. I was just cueing, probing, and trying to get the sounds. And then after, while I watched the video, I could go through and accurately, dictate what happened. So what I'm obviously really noticing here is that my kid was dropping a lot of final consonants, but had no issues with stress. Stress is a really big indicator with childhood apraxia of speech, but we'll just move in a little bit deeper and see what was going on with this particular case. So once we entered this multisyllabic region, all the words sounded the same. So this was really interesting to me because I tried multiple times to get different cues, different probes, and we ended up landing where lemon is mama and wagon is mama and muffin is mama. And they were all the same word over and over. And these errors were only occurring in this bigger, more complex word area. So I found that really interesting. This is just kind of a side note of this particular assessment. But I will say, you can see over here at the side where it says features noted, you go back to the beginning of the assessment and you'll see how to note for features. And this is really relevant when you come down to the CAS decision guide. So you need to make sure that when you're checking a pink box, if you're going to check a pink box, that means that they had to produce that error more than once over and over on the same probe. So I think it's twice. They have to produce the error 2 times and then it counts. So for some of these errors, I might have noticed them earlier in the assessment, but they don't actually count. They don't get a pink check. So what you end up doing is calculating number of speech probes that were given, the number of features that were observed, and if you got more than 4 features and more than 3 speech probes, then you're likely working with a child who has signs, at least, of childhood apraxia of speech, and you can continue with motor planning therapy. So I hope that this was helpful to anyone who has never used this informal assessment guide. It was really enlightening for me, and I definitely plan to continue using this in person and virtually. And I also hope that this gave you a little bit of insight of how you could use other types of assessments on the green screen by just taking photos, if you own the assessment, taking photos of the assessment, and for personal use, putting them into a PowerPoint and then sharing your PowerPoint as a background. And there you have it. So let me know if this was useful to you. I will talk to you all soon. Thanks.